Around 500 BCE, something unprecedented happened in human history. A group of people decided they didn't need a king. They decided they could govern themselves. This radical idea, democracy, would reshape civilization forever. And it started in ancient Greece in a small city-state called Athens. This is the story of how ordinary people invented freedom. Greece emerged from the Bronze Age collapse around 1100 BCE as scattered settlements and city-states. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, each was independent, governed by kings and nobles. But gradually, something changed. Trade flourished. Ideas spread. People began questioning authority. By the 6th century BCE, Athens was ready for revolution. Not violent, intellectual, a revolution of ideas. Here's what's revolutionary. Before ancient Greece, no civilization had attempted democracy. Pharaohs ruled Egypt, kings ruled Persia. But Athens said something different. Power comes from the people. Citizens would gather, debate, and vote. Every citizen had a voice. Every voice mattered. This wasn't just politics, it was a fundamental reimagining of human society. The transition wasn't smooth. Early Athens was ruled by aristocrats who hoarded power and wealth. Farmers fell into debt slavery. Conflict erupted. Then Solon arrived around 594 BCE and reformed the system. He canceled debts, freed slaves, and created new political structures. He didn't create full democracy, but he opened the door. But here's the puzzle. Why did Greece develop democracy when every other ancient civilization chose monarchy or empire? What made Greeks different? Was it geography? Isolated city-states forcing independence? Was it philosophy? The Greek love of debate and questioning? Was it accident or design? The answer reveals something profound about how civilizations evolve. Imagine being an Athenian farmer in 5 and 10 BCE. You're exhausted from tyranny, from kings who take your harvest, from laws you never agreed to. Then someone says, what if we governed ourselves? What if your voice mattered? What if law came from us, not from above? That hope, that possibility, changed everything. The overthrow of the tyrant Hippias in 510 BCE was the moment everything shifted. Athens abolished tyranny and began building something new. Cleisthenes reformed the political system, creating institutions that would become the foundation of democracy. Citizens were organized into tribes and demes. Power was distributed. No single person could dominate. Ancient Greece didn't invent democracy overnight. It was a gradual transformation from monarchy to oligarchy to democratic experiment. But the journey began with a radical question. What if power belonged to the people? From that question grew everything: citizenship, voting, debate, representation. The birth of democracy in Greece wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a revolution that would echo through millennia. Ancient Athens wasn't always a democracy. It began under tyrants who ruled with absolute power. Farmers were enslaved to creditors. Voices went unheard, but change was coming. One man, Solon, set the stage for a revolution, not in blood, but in law. Solon's reforms in 594 BCE canceled debts and freed farmers from slavery, planting seeds for broader political involvement. He divided society into classes based on wealth, allowing more citizens to participate in governance. This wasn't full democracy, but it cracked the door open. Then came Cleisthenes in 508 BCE, who reorganized Athens politically. He created demes, local districts that became the building blocks of democracy. Power was spread, representation expanded, and citizens finally had a real say in decision-making. The Council of 500 was born, shaping laws and policies. Voting and debate became cornerstones of Athenian life. Citizens gathered in the assembly to speak freely and vote openly. Jury courts ensured justice came from the people themselves. This was radical, unprecedented. Ordinary people were not subjects, but participants. But democracy had limits. Women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded. How did the Athenians justify this? What conflicts arose between ideals and reality? These tensions would shape the evolution of democracy for centuries. For the first time, people felt empowered. Athens became a world where your voice could change law. where debate was celebrated as a civic duty. This was the birth of political freedom, not for all, but for many. It laid the foundation for future democratic ideas. Democracy wasn't inevitable. It emerged from reform, struggle, and vision. Athens chose participation over submission. It was a fragile promise, easy to break, difficult to maintain, but its spirit endured. The transition from tyranny to democratic citizenship in Athens redefined governance. It sparked a political experiment that challenged monarchies and autocracies, inspiring future generations. The seeds planted by Solon and Cleisthenes would grow into one of the most influential systems in world history. Democracy in Athens was unlike anything before. Power was literally in the hands of the people. Every citizen over 18 could attend the assembly, debate, and vote on the laws. No kings, no distant rulers. This was a government of the many, not the few, and it worked. The assembly met regularly on Pnyx Hill, where thousands gathered under open sky to make decisions. Citizens voted on war, peace, taxes, laws, and justice. Magistrates were chosen by lottery, sortition, not election. This prevented corruption and ensured that ordinary people, not career politicians, held power. Every citizen had an equal chance of governing. Here's what reveals the radicalism of Athenian democracy. Voting wasn't just theoretical. Laws passed by the assembly were binding. Military campaigns approved by vote actually happened. Resources allocated by citizens went exactly where they voted. Your decision mattered. Your voice shaped reality. This wasn't symbolic democracy. It was direct, immediate, consequential governance. Jury courts were perhaps the most democratic institution. Hundreds of citizens, sometimes over 500, would judge legal cases. Juries represented the people as a whole. Wealthy and poor, educated and simple farmers all sat together, rendering justice. This distributed power widely and prevented any single judge from wielding excessive authority. Justice came from the community, not from on high. But here's what puzzles historians. How did this system function with such mass participation? How were decisions coordinated? How did debate among thousands not descend into chaos? The answer reveals brilliant institutional design. Time limits on speeches prevented endless filibustering. Show of hands made voting quick. The assembly had procedures and rules. Democracy with structure. It was messy, sometimes inefficient, but it worked remarkably well. Imagine standing on Pnyx Hill with 6,000 other citizens, your voice carrying across the crowd. A craftsman, a farmer, a merchant, all equal in this moment. Your argument could persuade thousands. Your vote counted the same as anyone else's. This wasn't just participation, it was empowerment. Citizens didn't feel like subjects, they felt like owners of their state. Women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded, a massive and shameful limitation. Yet among male citizens, equality was genuine and practiced. Even the poorest man had voting rights equal to the richest. Even slaves could sometimes attend assemblies as spectators, witnessing how their masters governed. This wasn't perfect democracy. It was democratic for some, not all. Yet it was revolutionary compared to every other civilization. The institutions of Athens, assembly, jury courts, magistracies by lot, created a system where power rotated constantly. No one person could dominate for long. Ostracism, the practice of voting to exile dangerous politicians, showed that power ultimately rested with the people. This decentralization of power, this constant circulation of authority, is what made Athenian democracy work and survive. But democracy's greatest strength would soon become its greatest vulnerability. Athenian democracy wasn't just a system of government. It was a lived experience of collective power. Citizens didn't simply vote every few years. They participated constantly, directly, and actively in governance. The Agora and Pnyx became stages where ordinary people became statesmen, where debate shaped destiny, where democracy wasn't an ideal but a daily practice. Democracy gave Athens something unprecedented: the freedom to think. And the Greeks used that freedom to revolutionize human thought itself. They asked questions no one had dared ask before. Why do things exist? How should we live? What is justice? What is truth? This wasn't just philosophy, it was the birth of Western intellectual tradition. Socrates emerged as the father of Western philosophy, wandering Athens questioning citizens about virtue, knowledge, and justice. He didn't write books or lecture from a stage. He engaged people in dialogue, forcing them to examine their own beliefs. His method, questioning assumptions to reach deeper truth, became the foundation of philosophical inquiry for millennia. Socrates believed true wisdom came from acknowledging what you don't know. Here's what's remarkable. Socrates was executed by Athens in 399 BCE for corrupting youth and impiety. Yet democracy allowed him to question authority, to challenge conventional wisdom, to teach freely until his trial. This contradiction reveals something profound about democracy itself. It protects freedom while remaining fragile and imperfect. But his death sparked a revolution of ideas that spread across centuries, not violence. Plato, Socrates' student, founded the Academy around 387 BCE. This was more than a school. It was the world's first university. Students studied mathematics, astronomy, rhetoric, and philosophy under one roof. Plato believed education should prepare citizens for governance and truth-seeking. His masterwork, The Republic, explored what justice means and how ideal states should function. Democracy inspired these philosophical questions, but Plato sometimes questioned democracy itself. Plato proposed the theory of forms, the idea that eternal, unchanging ideas lie behind the material world we perceive. Mathematical truths like geometry reflected these perfect forms. This abstract thinking, imagining invisible realities beyond material existence, was uniquely Greek. It represented a leap in human consciousness, moving beyond practical observation to theoretical understanding that would define Western thought. Aristotle, Plato's student, rejected some of his teacher's ideas and developed his own systematic philosophy. He believed knowledge came through observation and logic, not abstract forms. He walked while teaching, the peripatetic method, engaging students in constant dialogue. Aristotle studied everything: biology, physics, ethics, politics, metaphysics, poetry. He organized knowledge into systems and frameworks that influenced thought for 2,000 years, creating templates for how to think about the world. The Greeks invented logic and mathematics as formal disciplines. Pythagoras discovered mathematical relationships in music and the cosmos. Euclid systematized geometry into axioms and proofs. These weren't just intellectual exercises. They fundamentally changed how humans understood reality. They created the scientific method centuries before modern science existed. Greek thinkers proved that the universe operates according to rational principles that human minds could understand. But here's the paradox. The same Greeks who pioneered logic and reason also believed in gods, myths, and divine intervention. They could be simultaneously rational and mystical. How did this tension shape their thinking? Did it limit them or enhance their creativity? Perhaps the interplay between reason and imagination created the unique brilliance of the Greek mind. They didn't force nature into a binary. They accepted complexity. Greek philosophy wasn't just limited to Athens. It became universal. These ideas about justice, virtue, knowledge, and truth belong to all humanity. A slave in Rome, a merchant in Egypt, a scholar in Persia could engage with Plato's forms or Aristotle's logic. Philosophy broke free from its birthplace to become global. Democracy created the freedom for thought. Greek thinkers created the thoughts that would reshape civilization forever. Democracy didn't just create philosophers and politicians, it created art on a scale never before seen. The wealth, the confidence, the freedom of democratic Athens poured into temples, sculptures, plays, and poetry. Between 480 and 430 BCE, Athens entered a golden age, a cultural explosion that would define Western civilization for millennia. This was the age of Pericles, and it produced some of humanity's greatest masterpieces. Pericles, the leading statesman of Athens, understood something profound. A great civilization needs culture as much as politics. He directed vast resources toward art and architecture. The Parthenon, the most iconic building in Western history, was built during his era. This wasn't a military fortress or palace for a king. It was a temple for the goddess Athena, built by and for the people. Architecture became democracy's monument. The Parthenon wasn't just big, it was mathematically perfect. Architects used optical illusions and precise proportions to create harmony. Sculptors carved marble with such skill that the statues seem almost alive. The Elgin marbles, sculptures from the Parthenon, still take our breath away 2,400 years later. This wasn't decoration, it was artistic vision realized at the highest level. A democratic society had the resources and motivation to create beauty. Theater was the soul of Athenian culture. Plays were performed during festivals dedicated to Dionysus, attracting thousands of citizens. Tragedies explored profound moral questions: duty versus desire, justice versus revenge, human versus divine will. Sophocles, Aeschylus, and Euripides created masterpieces that still move audiences today. Comedy offered satire and social criticism. Through drama, Athens engaged with its deepest questions in a public, communal setting. These plays weren't entertainment alone. They were venues for democratic discourse. Citizens debated the ideas presented on stage in the agora afterward. Theater was where society examined itself, questioned authority, explored ethics. A playwright could present a hero defying the gods, and audiences would contemplate what that meant for their own city. Democracy created the freedom for such bold artistic expression. But here's what historians puzzle over. How did a city of only 250,000 people produce so much genius simultaneously? Why did Socrates, Plato, Sophocles, Phidias, and dozens of other great thinkers and artists all live in Athens at the same time? Was it chance, or did democracy create conditions where genius flourished? Perhaps freedom of thought and expression attracted brilliant minds from across Greece. Imagine walking through Athens during this era. The Acropolis glowed with new temples. Theaters rang with dramatic speeches. Markets buzzed with philosophical debate. Citizens weren't just governed. They were inspired, challenged, moved. Culture wasn't a luxury for the elite. It was woven into civic life. Democracy created this: a society where beauty mattered, where art was public, where culture belonged to everyone. The legacy of Athenian art proved more enduring than Athenian power. Empires rose and fell, but the Parthenon stood. Governments changed, but Greek drama remained. Military victories were forgotten, but Greek sculpture inspired every civilization that followed. Democratic Athens didn't just govern well, it created works of genius that transcended time and culture. The Golden Age of Athens was democracy's greatest gift to human civilization. Freedom sparked creativity, wealth enabled construction, confidence inspired ambition. The result was art that defined beauty itself for Western culture. From the Parthenon to Sophocles' tragedies, from sculpture to philosophy, Athens created a cultural legacy that remains unmatched. Democracy didn't just change government, it unleashed human creativity. Democracy made Athens powerful, but also vulnerable. The same freedom that inspired philosophy and art also created debate, division, and sometimes reckless decisions. In 431 BCE, Athens entered a war that would last 27 years and destroy everything Pericles had built. The Peloponnesian War wasn't just a military conflict, it was democracy's greatest test, and it exposed the system's deepest flaws. Athens faced Sparta, a militaristic oligarchy, in a struggle for dominance over Greece. Pericles argued for war, and the assembly voted to fight. Citizens debated strategy, voted on military decisions, and sent their sons to battle. Democracy meant collective responsibility for decisions, and collective suffering when those decisions proved wrong. The war would reveal how democracies can be swayed by emotion, how crowds can make catastrophic choices. Here's what's devastating. Pericles convinced Athens to invade Sicily, a distant land far from home. The Athenian fleet sailed with thousands of soldiers to conquer new territory. But the campaign failed catastrophically. Thousands died. Ships were destroyed. Survivors were enslaved. The entire expedition was a disaster, and it happened because the assembly voted for it, because Pericles persuaded them, because democracy allowed them to make this terrible choice. But worse than military defeat came plague. In 430 BCE, a disease swept through crowded Athens, killing tens of thousands. Citizens died faster than they could be buried. Pericles himself died from plague. The city became a mass grave. Despair replaced confidence. Suddenly, the great democracy seemed cursed, vulnerable, fragile. The plague killed perhaps 1/3 of Athens' population, a catastrophic blow from which recovery seemed impossible. Yet here's what's puzzling. Despite military defeats and plague, Athens continued fighting for 27 years. Why didn't they surrender? Why did citizens keep voting to continue a war they were losing? The answer reveals something profound about democracy. It creates commitment. Citizens feel ownership. Even in defeat, they resist surrender because they believe in the system, in themselves. Democracy can be stubborn, even unto destruction. Imagine being an Athenian during these years. Your sons are at war. Disease kills your neighbors. The walls of your city are under siege. Yet you gather in the assembly and debate whether to surrender. Some argue for peace, others for continued resistance. You vote, hoping your choice will save Athens, but it doesn't. Your choice, and millions of other choices, lead only to more suffering. In 404 BCE, Athens finally surrendered. Sparta imposed harsh terms. The walls were torn down, the fleet destroyed, the empire dissolved. Democracy itself was briefly replaced with oligarchy imposed by Sparta. The city that had invented freedom was occupied, humiliated, stripped of power. The Golden Age was over. A civilization that had dominated Greece lay in ruins. The Peloponnesian War revealed democracy's vulnerability, its tendency toward poor decisions, its susceptibility to emotion, its difficulty correcting course once committed. Yet Athens survived. Within decades, the walls were rebuilt. Democracy was restored. The city recovered and flourished again. Democracy had failed the test of war, but Athens didn't abandon it. This resilience, this commitment to democracy even after devastating failure, would define Greek political development for centuries. After the devastation of the Peloponnesian War, Athens could have disappeared from history. The city was defeated, humiliated, occupied. Its empire was gone. Its walls lay in rubble. But something remarkable happened. Athens recovered. Within a generation, the walls were rebuilt. Democracy was restored. The city rose again. This wasn't a recovery of power, it was a recovery of spirit, a recommitment to the democratic ideals that had defined them. Sparta tried to impose oligarchy on Athens, but the Athenians resisted. Within a few years, democracy was brought back, and surprisingly, the exiles and victors reconciled. This act of political forgiveness was extraordinary. Instead of revenge, instead of civil war, Athenians chose unity. They understood that democracy required cooperation even among those who had opposed each other. This wasn't weakness. It was political wisdom born from suffering. Here's what's inspiring. The rebuilding of Athens' walls became a civic project that united the entire city. Citizens, rich and poor, worked together reconstructing their defenses. Walls that once protected an empire now protected a diminished city. But those walls symbolized something powerful: resilience, determination, refusal to accept defeat. The act of rebuilding together strengthened democratic bonds more than any speech could have. Trade and commerce flourished as peace returned. Athens' ports reopened. Merchants from across the Mediterranean came to trade. The city's artisans, potters, sculptors, silversmiths found markets again. Wealth slowly returned. Not the empire wealth of Pericles' era, but enough to restore prosperity. Economic recovery gave citizens hope and stability. They could think beyond survival again, beyond mere politics, toward culture and philosophy. The philosophers of post-war Athens were different from their predecessors. Plato and Aristotle grappled with what democracy meant in the aftermath of war and failure. They questioned whether democracy could truly work or whether it was fundamentally flawed. Yet they continued the Socratic tradition, engaging in dialogue, examining assumptions, seeking truth through reason. Democracy survived not because it was perfect, but because Athenians believed in its potential. But here's the paradox. Even as Athens recovered politically and economically, its military power never returned to its former heights. It would never again dominate Greece as it once had. Yet the city remained influential, respected, and culturally vibrant. Why did Athens matter if it no longer had empire? The answer is that Athens had become something more important than a military power. It had become an idea. Democracy, philosophy, art, and intellectual freedom, these ideas proved more enduring than military might. Imagine the psychological transformation required of Athenians. They had to accept that their city would no longer rule the Mediterranean. They had to release the dream of empire. Yet, instead of despair, many embraced a new identity. Not as conquerors, but as philosophers, artists, and citizens of the world's first democracy. This reorientation wasn't easy, but it revealed something profound. Athenians' deeper identity was intellectual and political, not military. The ultimate irony is that while Athens lost its military empire, its cultural empire was just beginning. Decades later, a Macedonian king named Philip II would conquer Greece. But his son, Alexander the Great, tutored by the Athenian philosopher Aristotle, would spread Greek culture, philosophy, and political ideas across the known world. Rome would later conquer Greece, but as the Roman poet Horace famously said, "Captive Greece took captive her rude conqueror." The recovery of Athens after the Peloponnesian War proved that democracy could survive catastrophic failure. It demonstrated that people could choose forgiveness over revenge, unity over division, and recommitment to democratic values over abandonment. Athens would never be what it was, but it became something perhaps more important, a model of resilience, of democratic renewal, of the possibility of starting over. The city that had invented democracy survived democracy's greatest test and emerged with renewed commitment to its ideals. Ancient Athens lasted only a few centuries as a dominant power. Yet its influence has lasted over 2,400 years and continues growing. Democracy didn't die with Athens. It spread across the world. Every modern parliament, every voting booth, every citizen assembly traces its lineage back to the Pnyx Hill, where ordinary Athenians gathered to govern themselves. This is the story of how one small city-state changed human civilization forever. After Athens fell to Philip of Macedon and later to Rome, the city itself declined. But the idea of democracy lived on. Roman republics borrowed from Athenian models. Medieval thinkers rediscovered Greek philosophy. Renaissance scholars celebrated Athenian democracy as a golden ideal. When American and French revolutionaries sought inspiration for new governments, they looked back to ancient Athens. Democracy wasn't just an Athenian experiment. It became a universal aspiration. Look around the modern world. Legislatures, parliaments, city councils, town halls, all descended from Athenian democracy. Citizens voting on laws, representatives debating policy, juries judging cases, all inherited from ancient Greece. Universities still use Socratic dialogue to teach. Philosophers still grapple with Plato and Aristotle. Theater still explores moral questions like Greek tragedy did. The DNA of Western civilization is fundamentally Athenian. Western philosophy begins with the Greeks. Every question about ethics, politics, knowledge, and meaning that we ask today echoes questions Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle asked 2,400 years ago. Scientific method traces back to Greek rational inquiry. Logic and mathematics emerged from Greece. The very idea that human reason can understand the universe. This originated in ancient Greece. Modern science isn't ancient, but the assumption underlying it, that nature operates rationally, is fundamentally Greek. But here's what puzzles scholars. How did such a small city, never controlling more than a fraction of the Greek world, exert such enormous influence on human history. Athens didn't have the empire of Persia or Rome. It didn't spread its culture through conquest. Yet somehow, democratic ideals and philosophical inquiry became the foundation of Western civilization. What was it about Athens that gave its ideas such power? Perhaps it was precisely that they were ideas. Not military might, but intellectual and political innovations. Today, over 2 billion people live in democracies worldwide. Democratic institutions protect billions of lives, preserve freedoms, and allow people to participate in their own governance. This isn't guaranteed. Democracies are fragile. They require maintenance. They can fail. But whenever citizens gather to debate and vote, they're participating in something that began in Athens. They're inheriting a legacy of freedom, participation, and collective responsibility that stretches back millennia. The ruins of Athens, the Parthenon, the Agora, the Theater of Dionysus, still stand as testimony to what humans can achieve. They're not just monuments to ancient glory. They're reminders that ordinary people working together can create beauty, wisdom, and systems of governance that endure. The Greeks proved that democracy works, that philosophy matters, that art elevates civilization, that ordinary citizens can govern themselves effectively. Ancient Greece invented democracy, and democracy changed everything. It transformed how humans think about power, governance, and human potential. From the voting assemblies of Athens to modern parliaments, from Socratic dialogue to scientific inquiry, from Greek tragedy to contemporary theater, the legacy endures. Democracy wasn't just an Athenian achievement, it was a gift to all humanity. And every time we vote, debate, speak freely, or demand to be heard, we're honoring the legacy of those ancient Athenians who dared to imagine that power could belong to the people.